Good morning, everyone. Welcome back, and I can't tell you how good it is to see you. Um, it's times like COVID you realize we are social animals, and we need each other, and to see you and to see students starting to move in, it does something for me, and I'm hoping that it does something for you too. And um, it's really amazing to me that we're just a year ago. Was when we kicked off last year's Welcome Back, and look how different it is in a year. How much can change in a year, and it reminds me of that kind of very famous line by Heraclitus where he says, "Everything flows. You can't step twice into the same river." And our river has shifted. It has changed quite a bit, and I just have to tell you how in awe I am of our campus, you individually, for really navigating uncharted territory, professionally, personally, with your families. And it does feel more than ever that we really are together in this boat, and we rely on each other. Just so you know, I just found out this today, just to give you some perspective on the room today. Vance Larson let us know that they actually, the music division and that have marked out the seats that you're in. And if you see a blue piece of tape, that marks out 6 feet. So that just marks the sort of the 6 feet markers across the row there, and then every other row then has no blue markers, which means this is sort of a separated kind of exercise. As long as you have masks, you're fine. If you get a chance maybe to have a seat between you, that's probably just even that much more safe. But we are doing, I think, all we reasonably can to make sure we're protecting our students and protecting you. And ultimately, and this is a message that we all have to really just pound into our students, is that we will not have the privilege of being face-to-face unless people take this pandemic seriously. So as you know, we've mandated, as a matter of policy and as a matter of a student conduct issue, if students don't have masks on. And of course, what we all sort of worry about is what happens after they leave this campus in terms of what they're bringing back. But as long as we have masks, we know that mitigates this to a very large extent, making sure we're de-densifying the campus, and we're making sure that we're washing our hands and staying, making sure that we have the sanitizer. I want to start out with really a thought from the musical Hamilton. I saw Hamilton for the very first time it's now on cable, and I'd heard so much about it, but hadn't really thought that I was that interested in seeing it because it seemed very hyped up, but it was very, very good if you've seen it. But there's one particular line that really made me stop and think, and this is the line, "History has its eyes on you," right? And if you know the song that they're singing, it's essentially really them thinking, the early founders, about what we do now will matter very much to history. And I think about that in terms of our collective work here, is how will history look to us? How will history 20, 30, 40 years from now thank us? Or will there be derision on some level because we didn't do what we knew maybe was what we needed to do? And I take that very seriously, especially when we are the inheritors of decisions of faculty and staff that came before us, and we're very much in a privileged position. And how do we sort of, again, carry that on? I think this is our great challenge. It's also our great opportunity as we collectively try to make this institution better. We are in the process of becoming, individually, you, me, our students in particular, we are in the process of, we are emergent beings. We are always in a state of provisional, transitional state to something else. We are. It's an eternal principle that we understand, and hopefully what we're transforming into is something better, something greater, more thoughtful, empathetic beings. And I really do consider this to be sacred work that we're doing. And why? Because we are dealing with human beings. We are making, hopefully, our communities better, providing more opportunities for them, providing greater options in their lives. We are attempting to help our students be more imaginative about their world and about themselves, and help them be more tolerant, more thoughtful, more productive, local and global citizens. So we are in a process of co-creation, all of us. We are creating something. And what that is really going to be sort of determined on what our collective values are. And we are going to be able to sort of, that makes manifest, though, those kind of values are manifest in our strategic plan and other things that we're going to talk about today. So it is lovely to see you, to be a part of a community in its very best sense, as I look at you and as I somewhat recognize you with, with just your eyes peering over your masks. This is an uncommon community, and I thank you for it. So what the process today is that we have the cabinet in front. We have Carson Howell, who's on Zoom. Carson is in quarantine, not that he is sick, but he does have a family member that may have been exposed, so he's playing it safe, as we all should. And so as we talk about issues that might relate to the administration and finance part of the campus, we'll bring him in a bit. So next slide. I want to start out with, again, good news. This was really fun to know that this last commencement, virtual, wasn't even really a virtual commencement, but these were the numbers of graduates that you graduated. And think about that jump just this last spring from years past. That is terrific, because that means we're getting students to the end of the row, getting students to that graduation piece. And I just loved that, that we graduated 1,375 graduates and over 1,500 awards. Next slide. Now, the other piece of news is that our enrollment management team has been working very, very hard to turn this 3-year enrollment decline around. And I want to really thank Terry Clausen and her staff. Terry, do you want to just sort of stand up? And I'd like to have you kind of hear the type of things that are in place to make sure that we are turning this around. Right now, we are depending on the week, so it fluctuates, as you know, anywhere from about 5% up to as high, we've had some weeks as high as 10% up. And today, I'm not sure where we are. We're somewhere in between that. But I think we as a campus need to just shine a little bit of light on some staff members and administrators that have really been working overtime this summer. So, Terry, you want to just talk us a little bit about our enrollment management, and really let's thank our staff.
So I am going to take my mask off for a minute so I'm not muffled, and hopefully there's 6 feet of distance, because I tend to be really hard on the mask wearing, as all my people know. We are up between 5 and 6% in overall enrollment for this upcoming year. And as the president mentioned, we've seen significant increase and decreases throughout the summer. What I will tell you is, had COVID not happened, we would be even further along than we are now. We're seeing a lot of students that are really nervous right now, and some have decided to hold off until spring. But that being said, we still have a fairly solid group of students where we will see a 5% increase in enrollment over last year. And we're still working. I cannot tell you how the phones are ringing off the hook between the admissions office, financial aid. The advising office is basically working around the clock to get students into classes right now. So we're so grateful for everything that everybody has done. A couple of things that really helped us this year, despite the fact that many of our activities had to be curtailed due to the pandemic, is that we implemented, and boy was it fortuitous, a new registration process for all of our incoming first-year students, where they would fill out a survey and then our advisors would work really hard to create that schedule for them. It helps students get full-time classes, so we were able to make sure that they had a good, solid, at least 12 to 15 credits of courses that were going to help them get to graduation. That, in of itself, helped us so much. We weren't allowed to do our registration open houses where we travel and register students. So that process, even though we'd begun before the pandemic hit, made such a huge impact in our registered students that I can't even tell you. We did virtual visits, virtual tours. Our admissions advisors did one-on-one counseling appointments with students, especially with this, are we going back to school, are we not going back to school, and then all of a sudden school is out. Students were really worried about what this upcoming fall would look like, and so we worked really hard to reassure them. SNO is known for its personalized attention through the admissions and enrollment process, and we wanted to keep that. We didn't want to lose that piece, even though we were doing everything in a computer. So I'm really happy to say that we were able to continue those really solid personal connections, and that made a huge difference. We've also started a call center, which is new to us, but we found ways to outreach to students to increase our yield, and we have big plans for this upcoming year. So,
thank you, Terry. Thanks for your leadership. And there's so many people that we need to, that have been working so hard. All of you have been working so hard, but you know, to come back to campus and have the campus look so beautiful. We thank our custodial and our grounds crews, our food service crews. A lot of them have been doing multiple jobs to make sure that we're maintaining cleanliness and other kinds of safety protocols. Our emergency operations committee working very, very hard in coordinating with our local health officials, making sure that we're getting our COVID response plan, working through a multitude of scenarios. Thank you very much. There have been faculty that have been redesigning, rethinking their curriculum in terms of how do we best make this happen. And so I'm just really amazed at the hard work that you have done. Next slide. This is all news that is a bit old, but I can't not again underscore the fact that we really are the best two-year college in America. And with our strategic plan, we think that we can even improve on 85% of that percentage over on the right, that 85% that students that have completed, transferred, or are still enrolled. We think that we can even improve on that, and that's really, really something. So thank you for really Snow College's terrific record on student success. Next slide. We, as you know, were named the safest college in Utah. We have plans to make sure that doesn't change. Next slide. So I'd like to have Rob Nielsen tell us a little bit. Another big project that's been happening over the summer is a remodel of our activity center. And just go through a couple of slides here to give you a sense of this is a brand new arena. And next slide. As you notice, there are all new seating. And next slide, I think, is our last one. So Rob, do you want to tell a little bit about that project?
So as you may know, the Activity Center is now about 42 years old. And so it was time for some upgrades and some remodels. So this year, they are redoing the plumbing and the air conditioning and the heating. All of the restrooms will be upgraded and locker rooms. And then as you can see, the gym has been totally remodeled with a new floor and new bleacher system. So as we start this new year, our students will have a new facility to be playing their intramurals and other activities on, as well as athletics and the volleyball and basketball team will be in there as well, eventually. It's been a really difficult project because of COVID. Right now, they're about a month and a half behind with the air conditioning, so we will have the gym. The building will be open for school to start. The pool will be open again for you lap swimmers. And so the facility will be open. It just won't have air conditioning probably until the middle of October when we don't need it. So that's one of the nice projects that's been worked on. And you'll see a crane there this week to put the new air conditioner handlers up on the roof and get everything taken care of. But it's moving along. It's a couple weeks behind schedule, but that's COVID related.
I want to be clear on something. The resources that are set aside for this project is another bucket of money that the state gives campuses. It's not like we can use those resources for anything else other than capital development and capital improvement projects. So this was actually funded a year ago. It's taken us, so this was another pot of money in another kind of legislative session. So I want to make sure that's clear that this doesn't take away from any of our other any of our other sort of resources. But I'd also like, while Rob, while we have you, talk to us a little bit about what's happening with athletic competitions this fall.
So if you're aware, it's been quite a summer of making decisions. The NJCAA has decided that we will move all all athletic championships to the spring. So we won't have any games or competitions in the fall. So basketball will start on January 20th. Volleyball will start on January 22nd, and they'll play their season. It will be a shortened season with basketball, for example, 22 games, volleyball with 20 games. Then soccer will start in the middle of March. Football will start, and football will be playing their games in April and May, the last part of March in April and May. So, and then softball will play their regular season. So it's going to be a very compact spring. So we'll have practice and scrimmages during the fall. If you have a student athlete who keeps telling you that they have to miss class for games in the fall, don't believe them. We'll work on that. But they'll be having practices and scrimmages during the fall. We'll take the break off during Christmas break and then come back and everybody will start getting ready for competition. That's been changing. There's been several schools across the country, both at our level and other levels, that have done away with their sports for a year, or they're postponing it and waiting to see. We had our football team here, and it was really good for us to have them. We had about 120 of the guys show up in July for summer school. It gave us a really good opportunity to practice COVID and food services and everything with the new guidelines. So they were here for a month. We actually had 4 cases. The first 2 we didn't know how to deal with, and we didn't do a very good job, but the last 2, it was really good. We followed the plans that we'd made, and so it was a really good experience for us to work with some real people, with food services, with housing, and all of the different things that are affected by COVID to learn how to deal with this. And we feel like we're really ready now to host our students and deal with whatever might happen.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. You know, another piece of this, thanks, we'll talk a little bit about COVID a little bit later, but I did want to mention that The federal government and through the CARES Act, Snow College received $2.4 million. $1.2 million of that was directed to students. That money went right to students in terms of if they were affected or the families were affected by COVID. This money was then allocated through our financial aid office. The other $1.2 million is intended to be able for those kinds of costs that COVID prompted. So everything from cameras in our classrooms to PPE, equipment, plexiglass, anything that relates to costs that were unanticipated were meant to cover that, so that it wouldn't, that would mitigate on our already, I think, sort of stressed budgets. Next slide. Another bit of good news, though, we've also found that as we talk about through our Reimagine campaign for need-based scholarships, that people have been extraordinarily generous to Snow College, even under the circumstances. This is actually quite surprising to me when there's so much uncertainty in the world for people to be this generous. We set a $5 million capital campaign goal last November, and we are 93% of the way there. And to be able to have these resources available for students, anywhere from short-term, small, financial gifts just to keep them, to pay their rent. It probably wouldn't surprise you because you know our students. It doesn't take much for them to feel like they're very financially insecure, and with this will help. In addition to the COVID money and these monies that will be available. So I wanted to thank our advancement office, Janie Harris, and she's been working very hard, and our alumni board, our foundation board, and so we have a lot to thank, people that really are pulling and cheering for us. Next slide. We also then have also received $900,000 of one-time money that needs to be spent by December 1. And you probably have seen the social media and the marketing around these short-term programs. And let me bring up Stacy McKiff to talk about this particular program. And I really want to thank her for her leadership and Melanie for working under very difficult circumstances to get these applications in, and all of you that were involved in something like 52 proposals. Stacy?
President, it's very exciting to have such great input and proposals and innovation coming from the campus for these 54 proposals that came in. We sent 13 proposals along to the state, and 10 of them got funded, as President mentioned, for around $900,000. The total award for all 16 institutions was $9 million, and so we got 10% of the total, so it's kind of exciting. And now we're in a position to deliver these trainings, and here are the programs that we're going to be delivering. But the key is the money needs to be spent by December 1st. And so right now, we need all of you to get on your social media and share the application link and share the information page so that we can get people enrolled in these programs. And the cost for people who are residents of Utah and citizens of the U.S. who have been at least a little bit impacted by COVID is zero cost. No tuition, no books, no fees. And so the funding that we received from the state through the CARES Act is going to cover all of those costs, so that's really exciting. I guess maybe I'll just say that there's a range of programs here. You can see we range everything from data analytics all the way to farm safety, so there's something for everybody there. And most of the training can be done online. And so if you have family members who don't even live in the 6-county area, maybe they're in Salt Lake or Provo, many of these programs are still available. And so our big job now is to just spread the word so that we can have the biggest impact possible. We'd really appreciate your help in doing that. And I want to also thank everyone who has kind of dropped everything that they're doing to make sure that this happens. We started with no system for registering people and the financial aid part and the scholarships and all that behind the scenes. We've had a lot of wonderful people helping to make sure this can happen for our students and for our community. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Stacy. Really appreciate you. And again, it just was really incredible to just get a glimpse into the kind of innate creativity that you have about these kinds of programs. We did not expect that kind of response, and it was really, really heartwarming. And the fact that we're, less than 4% of the state higher education budget, to be able to pull in 10% of the money here was very gratifying. And for us to punch above our weight, that's what we do here as Badgers. We were also able to get $400,000 of ongoing money for technical education, which I'll spend some time in a minute. When at a time when really the state had very little money, new money to give out, and so there's a vote of confidence in us as a campus. All right, next slide. I wanted to just share some thoughts with you as it relates to the charge that was given to me back in November from our Board of Regents. And every president, as they start their tenure at a place, is given a presidential charge. And I wanted to, now we're a year into this charge, I wanted to go over parts of this so that you can recognize that what the state wants from us, and what the state wants from us doesn't take away anything that we've been doing. It's a matter of just broadening and deepening what we do. But I felt it was probably important because this is something I go back to often, because these are the kinds of things, because I report to somebody too, these are the types of things that they're paying attention to. This is President Cook. I draw your attention to areas of focus as you define your agenda, set priorities, and meet the challenges of Snow College ahead. First, chart the path for Snow College's ongoing success. Snow College has a rich history of forging paths through changing times and unforeseen trials. Now, new challenges arise, impacting all of higher education. The industries that drive our economy are swiftly evolving. From all corners, voices of skepticism question whether higher education can effectively adapt. For many, cost remains a barrier to access, and debt stunts the growth of student dreams. Disruption is coming. Do not wait for Snow College to be acted upon. You must guide Snow College to reimagine what higher education can and will become. Your graduates must be endowed with remarkable imaginations, practical skills, and an unrelenting quest to innovate. They must be creative thinkers, they must be exacting craftsmen, and they must be lifelong learners. Your charge is to find new paths and bold practices to help Snow College's graduates meet their career ambitions, contribute to their communities, and lead in their industries, all in a changed economy. Find novel ways to educate students within the Snow College community and beyond. As Snow College is a destination for your students today, ensure Snow College remains a destination for their children and their grandchildren to come. Second, keep an inexorable focus on student success, access, and completion. The success of Snow College's students begins with access. A community college's clarion call is to be an accessible, affordable gateway into higher education, to provide comprehensive care to students from all backgrounds and circumstances. Snow College, however, is obligated to do more. Utah's rural residents face barriers to higher education unseen in more traditional community college settings. They must have access to high-quality education with options for working learners, support for underserved populations, and opportunities that students that are otherwise limited by time and distance. Equally essential is ensuring that the students who enter Snow College leave Snow College as graduates. Help them persevere. And as you have throughout your career, develop innovative completion programs, enlist mentors, advisors, peers, Guide, encourage, and cheer your students. Drag them by their orange and blue scarves if you have to, but make sure they finish their journey as Badger alumni. Third and finally, make Snow College a force for economic development. Snow College is unique among all of our public institutions in Utah. Here sits a comprehensive community college in the beating heart of rural Utah. But Snow College not only educates its students, it is the unifying identity of the community, the center for cultural encounters, and this cannot be overstated, the economic gravity for Central Utah. Look for openings to enhance that role. Partner with local leaders, businesses, and K-12 to cultivate new economic growth. Continue to strengthen and broaden offerings at the Richfield campus, particularly career and technical education. Identify skill gaps and workforce needs in your region, and create academic and technical programs that will fill those needs. And always remember the responsibility you bear to the community's economic potential. So with that as a foundation, next slide, and with our process of a strategic plan that began really late last year and into the spring, these have really helped kind of map out a future for us that I think that you'll agree that really is able to enhance everything that we love and are drawn to Snow College. But at the same time pushes us, challenges us to reach broader, to the types of community that we may not have spent enough time thinking about. Next slide. So I want to bring in our two co-chairs, Stacy McKiff and Carson Howell, who led, I think, a very sort of talented committee. Those of you in this room and listening, I hope that you understand our appreciation and our gratitude for your work. But maybe I could have Stacy talk a little bit about this first student success piece, because there are four primary areas in which the plan helps us focus. The first is student success, and then we'll alternate to Carson to the other, we'll alternate.
So I think it's really interesting in the letter that the president just read in his charge that we heard all of these words: quality, accessibility, and affordability. And that's really where we started with the strategic planning process. And the task force that the president and the council put together, it was just amazing. And everyone did such a good job, especially under the weird circumstances that we found ourselves in and continue to find ourselves in. So the first segment is student success. Increase national markers of student success through the institution by focusing on achievement gaps identified by the Aspen Institute. And so these student success supports, we got a lot of feedback about how we need to be sure that we're finding the achievement gaps and then finding ways to fill those achievement gaps. And so, as you can see here, we're trying to improve and not improve, maybe redirect and make more effective for individual students the advising process, which is already happening now. More supports through the college and curriculum, and we'll hear about that from academic affairs later today. And then the scholarship component, which we're already working on. So that's the student success segment. So these are strategies, and then as time goes by, we'll be releasing the KPIs, so the how exactly this is going to happen, and then also the measures. This is how we'll know when we're successful. So it's not just a piece of paper that has goals on it, but it shows actually what we're going to do and how we'll measure the success.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy. You may be wondering, what is the Aspen Institute? Many of you probably know, but I'm going to ask Melanie to talk about why the Aspen Institute is really a gold standard for two-year institutions like ours. You want to talk a little bit about that, Melanie, please?
Sure, but before I do, I probably want to recognize our team that helped us pull this together today. You may not know, but there are people live on the Richfield campus. There are people here, and then we have about 150 people who are tuned in from remote sites. And when we were talking as a cabinet about how we could pull this off, because this has become an important day for many of us. We've spent the whole summer apart, and we get to see our colleagues again. And so we look forward to the energy and the excitement of this day. And when we talked about how can we replicate that, our team really stepped up, and Lauren and Jesse and Gary, and to help us come up with something that would probably in many ways showcase how we're going to be doing classes this semester as well. But we're grateful to them for being so innovative. In terms of the Aspen Institute, like the president said, it's the gold standard for community colleges, and we're nominated every year to be recognized in the top schools. We've been asked a couple of years to actually apply for the award, and we haven't been a strong contender because we haven't focused enough as an institution on the achievement gap measures that Aspen focuses on. And Aspen is all about equity and access and student success, and they want to recognize schools who make it possible for students, no matter their economic background, no matter their racial background, no matter their educational background, can they come to this institution and succeed? And so we've been working on that. In fact, the programs had access for the first time this year to achievement gap information when they were doing their program assessment. And we're going to kick off this year with some ideas with the deans and department chairs on how we can close those achievement gaps, how we can move the needle so that we move the number higher than 85%, which when I attend national conferences, people are shocked at that number and they tell me we can't improve it, and I just think we can, so.
Great. Thanks very much. And again, yeah, thanks to you guys for helping us out, and they were since last night trying to figure out the technology. So thank you. Next slide. So this next one is academics, and this is really very critical to us. But Carson, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the conversations that were happening in the committee? What was important to the committee? What was important in this conversation?
Sure, and thank you. Good morning. It's nice to be here, even if it's virtually. But as we talked about academics in the committee, the committee recognized that the quality and the outcomes of Snow College students are patently linked to the quality of the teaching offered. And so in order to produce a better graduate, the committee felt that it was important to focus on enhancing the academic and technical programs and developing enhanced methods of instruction. So as the committee looked at that, they came up with about four strategies, four goals, looking at deepening the quality of those student experiences, looking to reevaluate and revise the curriculum and all the delivery formats to reflect the quality and inclusivity, contemporary content in academic disciplines, and especially when it comes to the technical programs, those needs of the employers. The committee, another goal or strategy that they had were the online programs and developing consistent and robust online programs, and not just for traditional students, but for non-traditional students, working adults, people who aren't able to come to Ephraim or Richfield. But how do we give a Snow College experience to a broader population of people? And then also a big one, and President, you touched on this in the charge that was given, but to leverage that career technical education and the technical education funding and infrastructure to make sure that we build up those programs. So those were some of the things that, those were the things that the committee came down on as those four goals, four strategies for Snow College to move forward. Talked about many, many more, but those were the four that the committee kind of decided upon would really make a difference.
Last spring, I was asked to serve as a commissioner for Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, our accrediting agency that accredits us. And the thing I've been learning through being a commissioner is the commission is very, very focused on achievement gaps, which is exactly what Aspen is interested in. And we're very good, right, at achievement, but we need to be able to segment that data in terms of isolating those particular types of students based on whatever category, racial, gender, age, et cetera. Where are those that are suffering the most? Because often what you have is an aggregate number there that can often mask problems for certain types of demographics. For example, we only have 1% of our students that are Native American. Yet we live very closely to the Paiute tribes, Ute, and Navajo tribes, and they often are a demographic that struggle with getting access and then completion. This is one of those areas in which we could do better. But just to note, in October, we will be having our Northwest visit. It will be different than before, but Becky Hermanson and Melanie and the whole cabinet have been working very hard to make sure that we have our self-study ready. And it will be based on our former strategic plan, because this one is relatively new. But just keep in mind that they will be looking for how are we doing in closing the achievement gaps by specific types of students. Next category on the plan, recruitment and retention. Stacy, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So recruitment and retention also plays a role with marketing, and marketing was a common theme that we heard. And probably everybody in this room, unless you're brand new, took the surveys so that we could get the feedback we needed to make these things happen. And so this recruitment and retention piece is heavily focused on marketing, and it also ties in very well to the other components we've already talked about. So first of all, the brand awareness, the resources we need, and just amping that up. Also, looking at new target markets. President just pointed out some other target markets that we could be focusing on, and so branching out and looking at what we could do better to reach out to certain populations. The online program piece is tied to this accessibility with working adults or maybe populations that aren't ready to come to school yet. Create accessible information sites. So this is the website and being strategic in getting the right information out to students and making it easy for them to access. And then a college-wide retention strategy. So you can see the marketing theme that's running through all of this in order to recruit the right students, make Snow College available to every student who wants the opportunity to come, and we give them the opportunity to succeed and keep them here until they graduate.
Thank you. Next slide. The fourth element of the strategic plan focuses on our employees, our people. And so, Carson, do you want to talk a little bit about what the committee, their conversations around employees?
Yeah, so I think one thing that the committee talked about early on was the spirit of snow. And I think that we've all heard that. And I heard it as soon as I arrived here in November. But that spirit of snow, the committee discussed that really exists because of the employees of Snow College. And that Snow College is a special place where the employees should feel supported and encouraged to innovate. And so I think in looking at colleges and how they speak across the country, they talk about the special places that they are because of the students. And I think at Snow College, and as the committee discussed it, that only rang half true because the employees make up the other half of that equation. And so the committee felt that it was important to recognize that in order for students to achieve greater success in their educational pursuits, it was important to achieve greater success for the employees. And so there were 4 goals or 4 strategies that came up out of this discussion with employees. One is to prioritize a compensation package for full and part-time employees. Another one is to ensure the elimination of any present equity gaps based on those disaggregated groups present that you talked about, not just for students, but again for employees. To develop and implement a diversity and inclusion plan to attract and retain diverse employees. And then also, I think a big one that came out was to expect, reward, and recognize those service-oriented behaviors, those that speak to that spirit of snow. And so that was an important one by the committee.
The fifth one I'll just take, and that is infrastructure. And the intention there is to create a campus plan that supports our work, right? I mean, it supports the strategic plan. So technology, right, is really critical in terms of our ability to effectively deliver and remove the technological barriers for our students and our staff and faculty. Capital facilities, I'm going to be pushing very hard, even though this is a bad year to be asking for a building. We need our capital facilities in order to meet the kinds of needs that we have. We know that our family sciences building is an embarrassment by any standard, and I keep reminding the state that that is just not acceptable, and we're going to continue to work on that. And really one that I thought was interesting that came out of this was provide measurable economic development contributions through an entrepreneurial mindset. I think this is something that scrapper institutions like ours, that were scrappers, is essentially that we can't necessarily rely on the state for the types of support that we need. We're 4% of the budget. And if we're always formalized to be 4% of the budget, then the bigger institutions will always get more than we will. And this is an argument that I'm making to the commissioner, is that Snow College, if the state values a community college in the heart of Utah, if you value it, state, fund it. You need to fund it. And you need to fund it right. And if we're funded on a formula, we're always going to be lacking, and we're always going to feel financially half-starved. So this is my commitment to you, that this place historically has not been given the types of due, financially or otherwise, of what, in terms of how it's performing. It's outperformed, right, its funding levels. And that's a terrific value add to the state, but the state needs to recognize that. And to have, we're in a really terrific position over the next little while for a potential governor to be from Sanpete County, to have both our senator and other legislator, a representative from Sanpete County, have a very strong representative in Sevier County who are pushing for us, pulling for us, and I just couldn't feel more confident in us being able to pull more resources this way. Let me shift the conversation a little bit and just remind ourselves who we serve. And these are coming up with finding and researching this data has humbled me greatly about our role. We, of course, this is no surprise here. We serve 6 counties, 6 of the most rural counties in the state. And as you can see, the vast majority of our students are traditional students. 93% of our students are traditional, and that's defined really as 18 to 21-year-old students. And that's what we're good at. No one does this better in the country than Snow College. We only serve about 7% non-traditional, which from an age category is anywhere from 24 to 50 years old. But next slide, I want you to pay attention really closely, because this matters in terms of our trajectory. This is from the Gardner Institute on the 6 counties in Utah in terms of our demographic growth. So we are, as you can see, the 2020 marker. And what you see in the orange line there is really our traditional age students, 18 to 24 in the Gardner study. And you can start to see that we are actually quite flat for the next while, and then we actually decline around 2030 with a little bit of a bump. But overall, only an 8% growth of traditional age students over the next 25 to 30 years. Now, that is actually much more severe than the state growth for traditional age students, but the state also mirrors this basic trajectory, which is flat and decline. 2025 will pose a real problem for the state of Utah. And once you have a declining enrollment for traditional age students, it becomes even more competitive. So the University of Utah, Utah State, and other better financed institutions are in a position to be in a much better position to recruit students away from Snow College. So this is something that we've got to prepare for. But what you'll see that kind of the most dramatic is really the non-traditional age. So over the same time period, there's a 56% growth for 24 to 44-year-olds and a 43% growth in 45 to 63-year-olds. That demographic is going to climb. So how do we actually really, while not abandoning our traditional age student recruitment, because we're going to scrap hard. We're going to work harder than anybody else. But at the same time, what are we doing? Right now, we only serve about 7% of our students that are in those categories, yet that is the group in our 6 counties that's going to grow. Next slide. Now, here are something that really is heartbreaking to me. And this is why this is sacred work for all of us. While we have been a terrific, as a state, really have been a sort of a terrific economic success story since 2008, one of the best managed states in the country, financially, it's very well positioned in the top 5 states in the nation. But again, this sort of aggregate, that kind of aggregate sort of number really hides a very tragic reality that economic opportunity did not go through the state of Utah in an even or balanced way. That it's our families, our communities, our counties that are suffering the most and yet aren't talked about. So in this case, the percent of persons living in poverty in the state of Utah is 9%. And that's based on the type of income that these families have. But in our 6 counties, it's 13%. And in some counties, like for example, Paiute, 19% of people living in Paiute County live in poverty. Next slide. The per capita income sort of tells a similar story. The per capita income for the state of Utah is a little over $25,000, where our counties, those people that we serve and we live among, it's a little over $19,000. And you can actually see in some cases like Sanpete County, our county here, where we're standing today, is barely just under $17,000. Next slide. The percent of adults aged 25 to 64 that actually have a college degree, the state of Utah, about 43% of the state of Utah has some kind of college degree, and that's everything from an associate's degree or above. But for our counties, only 1 out of 3 have degrees, and many of these students, we're finding, actually have some college, but no degree. So they actually have some credit, but no degree. And you can see like places like in Juab County, or actually in Sevier or in Sanpete, that number's even less. Next slide. The percent of children that live in intergenerational poverty for the state is 6%. For our state, or for our counties that we serve, it's 9%. And again, if you look at Sevier County, that's 15% of our kids live in multiple generations of poverty. They're caught in this cycle of intergenerational poverty, and education is the way out of it. Next slide. The unemployment rates, this is all pre-COVID stuff, so this doesn't even matter anymore hardly because unemployment is so off the charts, but this is pre-COVID. Again, our unemployment rates, this is 3% in Utah, is one of the lowest in the country. But our unemployment rate's higher. And you can see if you disaggregate that to some of our other counties, it's 6% pre-COVID in Wayne. And I can only imagine that COVID has actually exacerbated, right, this unemployment number. This one is probably the most sobering for me, and that when we're talking about educating people, it is not an overstatement to say that this is a matter of life and death. The suicide rates for Utah is 22 people per 100,000 Utahns. For our 6 counties, it's over 28 people per 100,000. But take a look at Juab. 38 people out of 100,000 commit suicide. And often this is tied to hopelessness, right? And when there's unemployment, when there's not that kind of economic opportunity, when there's not upward mobility, people do very drastic things. Now there's a lot that goes into this, everything from, from drug and alcohol abuse to depression, all of that. But education, right? Those that have an education tend to be happier and live longer lives. So we have a wicked problem here. We've talked about this last time. But this is what I keep telling our state officials. That we in this part of the state have to be a strategic asset for the state in these kinds of complex set of problems that we face as a collective group of 6 counties here in the state. We know about the participation and completion problem that we just showed you, the brain drain. Many of our students are leaving their communities in rural Utah to go to the Wasatch Front because that's where that's where their economic opportunities are. That's where the 4-year degrees are. And once they get there, that's when their internship opportunities, et cetera. So there is a problem with how do we keep our students in these communities if that's where they want to live and work. There are major workforce skill gaps. And with our technical education initiative, we're going to identify those and how we can adjust the misalignments that we have. Next slide. So who can we serve better? We've talked about this sort of amorphous group of non-traditional students, right? This sort of faceless group. But this is actually much more specific about when we talk about achievement gaps that we need to be able to close and to provide more access for. So on our traditional student side, we need to be able to do more for students who want and need a technical education, and we're going to be doing that. Rural students who can't travel to traditional campus. Many of these 18, 19-year-olds aren't going to go to college because it's just too far and impractical for them to do so. We have 70,000 homeschoolers in the state of Utah. And whatever percentage that is in rural Utah, which is not insignificant. How do we help them get into the system and to help them get degrees and education? Native American students, our Hispanic students. For us to be able to reach out, right, to these communities that may not really kind of understand or feel comfortable navigating institutions and processes like Snow College, we've got to be intentional about it. But some of the non-traditional students, these are our kind of categories of what we're calling them, is place-bound students. Those are really working adults that can't afford either through time or through money a traditional education experience. It's unrealistic to think that they can travel to one of our campuses in Richfield or here. Then there's the unfinished business students, which means they have some college but no degree. We have some of our non-traditional students that need upskilling and reskilling. How do we help and reach out to them? What about career switchers? Maybe especially in a time of COVID, how do we essentially provide short-term training, right, for these to be able to switch careers? And this Learn and Work initiative that we're working on under Stacy's direction is in part of that. We have veterans in our region. And what are we doing to help them? And then these others. And I'm going to talk a little bit, if we have time, a little bit about prison education, if we have time, and why we need to spend, I think, a little more time about how we can deliver education to inmates, because every dollar that's invested in prison education, there's a $5 return to state taxpayers. Why? Because 7 out of 10 inmates in Gunnison will be back in within 18 months. If we're able to educate these inmates to provide skills and provide opportunities, that recidivism drops down to 4 out of 10. Next slide. This just gives you a sense of where our workers are going in the state. This vacuum, right, this sort of sucking sound in Utah County and Salt Lake County is taking a lot of the best and brightest away from us. Next slide. So why technical education? As you know, and some have said, well, listen, we did technical education, a while ago. Are we going back? And I think that let me just show you some history. So when we had the Severe Valley Applied Technology Center back in the 80s and 90s, it was a very vibrant 1,500 students that were attending the Severe Valley Center. In the late 90s, when Snow College was merged with Severe Valley Tech, we dropped from 1,500 down and hovered around between 400 and 600 students. Why? Well, there are a couple of reasons we're learning as a group. One is that as we work with our K-16 Alliance, our superintendents tell us that up to 70% of our students that graduate from these rural high schools do not see themselves as college goers. What they do see themselves is maybe getting a certificate, right? A welding certificate, a electrical, plumbing, other kinds of maybe IT certificates, but college is not what they see themselves doing. So that's one thing. We essentially, as we try to essentially move from a technical education and move to more degrees and more credits, we essentially were trying to cram everybody through the credit hole and through the degree hole, which was well-intentioned, because back in the 90s and back in the early 2000s, I was part of the system then, we were saying we need to get kids to have a degree. And that is true. That does not change. But many kids, if that's too out of reach for them psychologically. So how do we meet students where they are so that they can get a taste of academic success through getting a certificate or something, and then make it sure that that can be stacked into a degree later if they feel they want to go on and get an associate's degree or one of our 4-year degrees. Next slide. So we've essentially created a technical education division. Now this money was allocated for us, specifically for the tech ed piece, and we'll be kind of moving forward pretty rapidly. But it's going to be sort of focused in Richfield, but remember we have 6 counties to serve. So part of the art form of getting technical education opportunities out to Millard and Juab and Wayne and Paiute and Sevier or Sanpete is to be able to have great relationships with our high schools and to be able to take advantage of their lab situations where we can continue to sort of find ways in which we can get technical education in the communities that need it most. Next slide. Now, as a result, we had a national search for a vice president for technical education, and actually, and I thank the committee for taking this assignment so seriously. And in the end, we were able to select Dan Peterson, Dr. Dan Peterson, who is actually in, I think, Richfield today with his wife, looking at houses and finding and looking for and meeting with some of our community. But he has a doctoral degree from Utah State, but he's had pretty extensive administrative experience at Utah State, Daymar Colleges, and Spartan College of Aeronautics. And so he's been, we were very impressed with Dr. Peterson's vision, his energy, his kind of experience and understanding of working with industry and what industry needs. And so we'll welcome him. He doesn't start until October, but we're very, very excited to have him as part of our team. Next slide. Let's just go through these. I think we're getting late on time. Let's go ahead and go. I just want to end. Let's go a little further. By the way, let's go through that. Thank you. Let's stop there. These other elements I'll bring back, but through we're going to have these weekly or every other week home or town halls or open fora. We found that many of you appreciate that kind of conversation. And so I want to talk about concurrent enrollment, which was one thing I wanted to bring up. I want to talk about prison education. I want to talk about some of these other things that are really important to us, but we're just making. We want to let you guys go and have some lunch. But I want to just end with some thoughts. I have a colleague that has this note on his computer. It's a sticky note, and the sticky note says, "Remember that you are transforming." I have to remind myself of that too, and we all need to, and especially when it comes to our students. We are transformative beings. We are in the process of becoming. Next slide. So I want to, and many of you might know Carol Dweck's work. And I just bought this book for the cabinet, and I'm willing, anybody who wants to read this book, I will find a way to get this book to you. So let's just reach out to Marcy, and she'll order these books. Next slide. Go ahead and next slide. Carol Dweck is a psychologist at Stanford. And what she found out early on in her career, she worked with children, was really about, as she put young students kind of through a battery of challenges, she found that different students acted and responded differently to challenge. And as she increased the difficulty, right, of these problems that these kids were doing, as the problems increased in complexity, there were some students who were not deterred, but actually were energized by the challenge. And she said she was very interested in understanding what the difference was, right, between those kind of students and other kinds of students that once they sort of reached up to a certain challenge, folded in that challenge. And she said, what students believe about their brains, whether they see their intelligence as something fixed or something that they can grow and change, has profound effects on their motivation, learning, and school achievement. So she identified that really there's two kinds of mindsets. Next slide. And as it relates to our students, if you think about that, we're all educators in here, whether you're a faculty member or a staff member, we are all educating. So how do we essentially help our students in the role of their adult transformation? And she found that there really are kind of two types of mindsets. One is a fixed mindset versus a growth or a learning mindset. Fixed mindsets, these kids, they just avoid failure. They stick with what they're good at, but don't really reach out because their fear of failing. Whereas students and you know them, and you probably know these kind of kids, there are some that just aren't afraid to fail, or they at least look at failure as not an indictment on them as a being, right, as a person, but at their moment in their learning. A fixed mindset, people desire to look smart, right, actually sort of interested in the actual learning itself. In some cases, fixed mindset students avoid challenges, where growth mindset embraces challenge. Fixed mindset sticks to what they know versus students that put a lot of energy and effort into learning. There doesn't seem to be much of a sort of change or growth in fixed mindset kids, but others feel like we're improving continuously. That we're kind of in this state of continuous change. Some are really problem-centric. They're focusing on the problems as opposed to focusing on solution-centric elements. There are those then on fixed mindset that feel like they take feedback and criticism personally, whereas a growth-minded or learning mindset is that feedback and criticism is about the current capabilities only. And what is really amazing about her work is that we often, right, feel like we were only born with a fixed kind of set of intelligence, right? We are what we are, right? We don't change, but she's found that is not true at all. Next slide. So what she realizes is that Einstein was never Einstein till later. Right? That it only took an incredible amount of work. Einstein did have some natural abilities, no doubt, but Einstein was able to do what he did because he worked hard at it. And her quote is that we like to think that our champions and idols, as superheroes who are born with that were born different from us, we don't like to think of them as relatively ordinary people who made themselves extraordinary, but that is true. Next slide. Michael Jordan, this is a great quote. He said, "I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and I've missed. I have failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Carol Dweck says that if parents want to give their children a gift, the best thing that we can do is to teach our children to love challenges, be intrigued by mistakes, enjoy effort, and keep learning. That way, their children don't have to be slaves of praise. What she means by that, in the 1990s, there was a movement, and we're all part of the movement, that we felt we needed to essentially, or that were called the self-esteem movement. That in some quarters, self-esteem in math seemed to become more important than knowing math. This is a quote from her book. That self-esteem in English seemed to become more important than reading and writing. But the biggest mistake was the belief that you could simply hand children self-esteem by telling them how smart and talented they are. So we have to sort of, in some ways, how do we instill into our students and into ourselves that it always really we can never really sort of settle in terms of our effort and our work and rethinking about what we're doing. Next slide. This is, I don't know if you know who Jimmy Jones is, but Jimmy Jones is a native Utahn, an artist in southern Utah. He's very famous for a lot of his paintings. I came across his work when I was at Southern Utah, and this was actually a picture he drew when he was 8 years old. And you can see it's probably very much like crayon drawings you and I did at 8 years old. In the corner there, you can see somebody with, looks like a hatchet and a turkey. Must have been around Thanksgiving. But this is what Jimmy Jones was like at 8 years old. You and I could have painted something very similar to that. And the next slide. This is what he became. And he's known for really being able to paint these landscapes in very hyper-realistic ways. The growth mindset believes, Carol Dweck says, that a person's true potential is the unknown and unknowable, that it's impossible to foresee that what can be accomplished with years of passion, toil, and training. Next slide. Here is what we currently are. We really are a place that places incredible value on that orange part there, the 2-year junior college, rural, face-to-face residential, and we're going to be relentless in preserving that, deepening it, and sustaining it. But really, it's been through our high school graduates and through concurrent enrollment that we have basically geared our attention. But we as an institution, we as individuals are in a process of becoming. And this is what we need to be. Next slide. We need to be a comprehensive community college, which means that there are lots of things that we haven't done before so that we can better serve those that need us most. So you can see that we're not only going to continue to do what we're really good at, but we're going to be asking for resources, we're going to be growing resources that we can do these other things and continue to offer a world-class Snow College education for everybody, particularly those that may be economically least among us. Thank you very much for your time and attention. The next slide is really about our day. So thank you very much. We'll continue to sort of have these conversations throughout the year, and especially if there are topics of conversation that you'd be interested in. But we're going to be probably every other week highlighting faculty work, and then on the other alternative weeks, we'll be identifying and focusing on campus business and policies or those things that we want to keep you updated on. I find it one of the greatest honors of my professional life to be here. I love it here. Jen, my wife, is here, and we thank whatever blessings we have to be here in this part of the world. We love it. We love it because we get a chance to associate with committed, dedicated, talented professionals. And I look forward to a really interesting year, a really interesting semester, and know that we're here. Our purpose is here to support you in your work. So thank you very much for your time and attention. And I guess we're going to be coming back either virtually. Will there be anything in here? No. So everything else from here on out is going to be virtual. And then you'll be introducing our keynote speaker, Kyle Reyes, on some very interesting topics that I think you'll find engaging. Thank you very much.